Hello again, this is Matt Moser, a partner with Alchemy Solutions, and I want to continue our mini-series here regarding Windows Forms up underneath COBOL. And what I'd like to do is to cover three different topics. One is elementary items, and then moving back and forth to properties, kind of focusing on text as a property, pulling the data from the form back to main, and we'll add a method to do that, as well as how do we wind up retaining the value if the user winds up pressing X, which actually winds up disposing the form, and we'll animate through that. So there's just some things to look out for and to be able to use while you're coding. So without too much ado, we'll get started again. I'm going to wind up showing first the elementary items, and what winds up happening if you try to set a property to something that's not an elementary item. So in this case we have two fields below, and below are not an elementary item. And if we come into the form load and we try to say set property dash text of button 1, and there's our IntelliSense, press escape, 2, WS not an elementary item. We try to compile that, WS not an elementary item cannot be set to object property. The reason for that, it's not a pure string. It has items contained underneath it, so therefore it can't be set to the property of that particular object. So the way you resolve that is to use strictly elementary items. And what we'll do is we'll come up here, and I have another elementary item here, which I created while you were away, or I was away. Copy. Whoops. Copy. And Control V. And we pasted it, and let's do our build and see what happens. It succeeded. So just something to be careful of or cognizant of while you're working. The next piece of interest is what happens when the user presses the X when they're actually running your application. It literally will do a dispose. So if you're looking to bring data back to your program, then what you really want to do is to retain that value. And so what I'm going to do, in order to bring the data back, I'm going to create a method, and which I actually created prior to this tutorial. I'm just going to copy it into our code here. So I'm going to copy code that I have, and basically all you'll see is the paste. And you'll notice that I set it to public. Okay, and you can learn more about object-oriented COBOL by going through the help, or if you have trouble with it, contact support, or you can contact me at matt_moser at mosersoft.com. And so you'll notice right here is that I've created something called return from text box 1. That's just a method ID. It'll act as a function. I have within it, I have a linkage section, and I have, what will wind up happening is you'll see when this runs, it gets executed from another program, from our main program. It'll return the value back to the main program. And so I need to come into here, and I'm going to copy some more code over, and what this code is going to do, we're going to put it into when the user pressed button 1, if you remember that. It's going to move text box, the value of text box 1 text, to this WS hold text box 1.text, which will be stored up inside working storage. Okay? Now what we need to do is we need to link that up to our main program is our main program wants to know what happened in the form. And this is one way to do it. There's many different ways to work with this. So I want to come back into main.cob. I'm going to add in a working storage value, which I'm copying from offsite. And it's already in there. Boy, am I efficient. And so the next thing I want to do, though, is upon returning from the form, I want to invoke and pull back that code, or the value of that text box, by invoking this code. We're going to paste it in place, and this is stuff that I had before. So what's going to wind up happening here? We're going to invoke a function of WK main form called return text from text box 1, which we put into form 1, and we're going to pass it this value. We're going to pass it this working storage item to be filled by the program. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. I'm going to do a build. Okay, we're going to add another breakpoint. It may already be there from my earlier work. Here's our dispose. And I want to show you what winds up happening. The dispose happens, which actually gets rid of the properties of the form prior to that line being executed. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see what happens. And I'll just step through it and explain it as the code's going along. So right now we have press me, and if you remember, when the press me happens, we go ahead and we whatever value we have in here, winds up getting put in here. But remember, we actually add an additional line of code which saved it off into a working storage item. When we press X here, I'm sorry, I have to do that all over again. I apologize, it was outside your viewing area. So when I say press here, whatever's inside the box will wind up going into the box, and it gets saved off as well into the working storage item. So now watch what happens. I press the X, and you're at the breakpoint of if disposing. So notice it didn't even return back to main yet. It's going through disposing for the main, which means the values from those properties would not be available to you at that time if you use the X to shut out your form, to close down your form. We'll continue running, and you'll notice that you're in the invoke. Okay, this invoke's going to invoke that method that we created and moved over there. And if we look, there's hello Joe. It's going to get passed back through linkage here at the end of our method. We do F11, and we're now at the end of the demo. And we now have the value back here. So if in this code you wanted to call a program or perform another menu, you could do it right here simply by checking the value that got returned back. You can always pause and stop these videos in the middle if there's any questions. Again, this is Matt Moser from Mosersoft.com, a partner with Alchemy Solutions. Take care. Thanks. Bye.